All right, we're here with defensive coordinator Alex Grinch. We know a lot of the returners. The big question was nickel. We talked about that. How are the young guys doing? There's a whole slew of young guys, specifically DBs, that you're working with. Who are they and how are they doing?
Yeah, and we're in a position right now where we have the extreme of the extreme from an experience standpoint. You have a group of seniors that have combined for played a lot of football games around Pullman, Washington, and then in the Pac-12, and then you got another group that have just are making their way into Pullman, Washington, and haven't yet learned about the Pac-12. And so those are the guys that we got to bring along, and it's one of those things. If you're in a situation where the freshmen are, they show up on campus, and we'll see you in spring football. That from a depth standpoint, we're not in that position. So those guys are getting reps and they're working their tails off. We're excited about the group overall. 5x5 is a young guy that's proven to himself enough to get some reps.
To be clear, that's
defense.
Favai.
Yeah, we'll pronounce it. You'll pronounce it better than I do.
I love it.
But he's done a nice job. Josh Talbot's shown well. He's gotten some reps with our two group. George Hicks in the secondary. And then you're talking about even the redshirt freshmen that are coming on, a Mason Vineyard that's shown well in pass rush, and so some guys, some names that ideally we hear from this fall from a production standpoint.
What's wild also is you just named 4 guys. Not that I wasn't considering those guys. I was thinking about some of the DBs. In that regard, there actually is a lot of quality youth on the team. It's not like 2 or 3 guys, but there's 10, 15 guys. A lot of those younger guys, redshirt freshmen and freshmen, are really good athletes.
And the guys I don't make much of are really the guys up front. That's usually the biggest transition to major college football is at the defensive line, just from both the speed standpoint, but also just the physical standpoint. I mean, they feel that the most, and so. But you're talking about guys in Willie Taylor, Will Rogers, Dallas Hobbs. All those guys that we're excited about as young guys in their program that as they develop and mature, we feel like we got a good group there. So,
was that what most of this fall camp was? Because you've got, like you said, there's not a ton of middle class of experience. That's been the theme, right? It's been a lot of returners and then a lot of really young guys. Was most of camp for you focusing on the youth? Because some of those guys are going to have to play.
Sure. And then trying to kind of, the way you do that is kind of mix the groups. Like a Jahad Woods, who I did not mention, is a redshirt freshman linebacker that we've been very pleased with, and bring some speed to the position that we're awfully excited about. But put him out there with a Peyton Pelor. Peyton's at the mic and Jahad's at the wheel. Now, and see what he can do with the one group. And so as you move guys up a group, then the threes could become twos and everything else, and give those guys as best you can simulate it. You want to give them real work against the top competition, the top group on the offensive side of the ball. So that's the best way to do it. By no means do the experienced guys get the day off. And they'll remind you of that, but it's responsible on our part to make sure that we're mixing groups.
How much are you adjusting scheme to personnel, or are you putting kids in positions to fit the scheme? How does that work?
Well, there's a mix. I mean, for the most part, some of it's done in the recruiting process, and then some of it very early on in camp, you're evaluating guys. A guy that you thought could be maybe on the second level of your defense that you look at and say, well, shoot, if we put his hands on the ground, he's got a chance to affect a passer. And if you can find one of those guys, you put his hand on the ground. I think we're not the most brightest balls, but we're smart enough to do some of those things. So, but that's just it. Is you're trying to piece that together, and again, we're trying to find the best 11 regardless of position, the best, and then ultimately the best 22 regardless of position, within reason. Obviously, you got to have some size out there.
So, were there any players? It's been 2 weeks. It's been a little less than 2 weeks, but essentially it's been 2 weeks. You knew what you had in the spring, and then you knew what you recruited. But did any guys get here and you go, wow, that kid worked in the off season? It's not just one practice, it's not 2 practice. It's been a decent body of work to go, this kid's improved a lot. Maybe we're going to need to get him some extra time or change his position, get him some reps.
Sure. Well, I mentioned Jahad Woods. The jump that he made from spring football could he be a depth guy? That's kind of how you're evaluating things. To now you're excited about the reps he's going to take on Saturdays for us, and so that's a real positive. I think Garrett McBroom, he's not a young guy, but he's an older guy that was a junior college player. That I think he's trending in the right way to be he started games for us, but to be more of a productive member of our defense. And Nnamdi Aguayo and Derek Moore. Nnamdi played as a redshirt freshman last year. Derek Moore was a true freshman. I mentioned those guys up front. That's a tough position to play as a young player. Well, now they're going into their sophomore year with all that experience that they gained last year, and you're seeing a confidence. You're seeing playing at a different speed, which is a real positive. So those guys are trending the right way, which is good.
All right, Coach. It's almost game week.
Yeah.
It's the end of fall camp. Next week will be like just a practice week, right?
Yeah.
This is the end of camp, next week's practice, and then it's Montana State week.
Well, and that's it. And what we haven't done a very good job of as coaches is preparing our guys to play at a high level early on in the season. And that's a responsibility that we have, and we put it right back on our shoulders. And so we got to do a better job of that. And we've evaluated everything this offseason to ensure that we do the right things to prepare our guys to play their best football. Like I said, are we pleased through 2 weeks? We are. But we got to continue that upward trend, and really at this point, once you fall into next week, it's almost like bowl game prep in terms of more specific towards the opponent.
Did you change anything from the last 2 years to this year?
Not huge changes, and we're doing a little bit more maybe in the mornings, to make sure that we're not video studying the Montana State right now, but we may be sneaking in some plays.
They don't even know it.
The guys don't know.
Yeah.
So I'm giving the secrets out, but which is good, just to train their eyes, and we see a very distinct offense, every single day in what our guys do. Well, the reality is we don't play Washington State, so we got to make sure that we're responsible that way to help our guys prepare to see the things that they're going to have to see over the course of the season. So we're doing that as best we can.